Hey everybody, my name is Isaac and I have not made an Instagram introduction video or anything yet. I probably won't bother, but I am a caretaker in our system and I have just come out of an extremely long period of dormancy, which would have been distressing and confusing enough, but it turns out I've also come back in the middle of a pandemic, which is just, it's great. I can't imagine any better scenario for me to come back to. But with that aside, I have decided that I'm going to try and follow the list of video ideas that we have to make. I was just going to sit here and ramble about the whole isolation thing for a while, but instead I'm here to talk about accents in alters, because a lot of the time alters do have different accents in a world because they're from all kinds of different places, and when they front, people would expect them to have the same accent, which is not often actually the case, especially if out here you have never been exposed to certain accents or you don't have the muscle memory to actually bring those out. And I know for a lot of people it can cause issues with things like denial and feeling invalid because you don't sound how you do inside. And there's also the thing that even if alters do have certain accents and they come out when they front, it's not necessarily the same or real as far as how somebody from said place would actually sound. And I think it's just, well, we all thought it was important to mention the fact that that doesn't matter. It doesn't affect your validity as an alter or a system just because you don't have the same accent when you front, and it might not sound, as far as people are concerned, genuine. And yeah, that doesn't change anything at all, because often when you have an alter of a certain, nationality, you may not have been there, you may not know the language, which is another thing. Actually, a lot of the time people have alters who can speak various language in a world but can't out here because the body has never learned it. And in a world, that language, say French, would be completely coherent and they'd be fluent in it, but out here they wouldn't necessarily actually know how to speak it. And that is a really weird one to get your head around because obviously, as far as you're concerned, in a world, you know exactly how to speak it, and anyone else who speaks it understands it, or you can read it and watch television in that language and completely understand everything that's being said. But your body has never actually learned said language, so it does not translate out here, which is also completely fine and valid. It doesn't mean that you're faking certain alters or faking anything at all, because you can have a French alter even if you've never been to France or you don't speak French. It is just completely up to your brain what is going on, essentially. You don't get much of a say in where your alters come from, who they are, all that kind of stuff. So basically, in short, I don't really know how to sum it up in a coherent sentence, but accents do not have to come through when you're fronting. They can come through in any which way, or they can just not come through at all. And that doesn't change the fact that an alter is from somewhere or has a certain accent. So you might have an alter from America who, when they front, does not have a different accent or voice from the body at all. And that doesn't change anything, especially as DID and OSDD, things like that, are meant to be covert disorders. So it actually makes a whole lot of sense that certain accents won't come through and people's voices don't change all that much when they are fronting. And I think that is something that isn't really talked about very much, but is completely understandable. So if your voice doesn't change when you front, if you know a language in a world but you don't out here, that is all completely fine and completely normal. And it is something that has caused issues for us in the past. We have alters from various places whose accents don't come through at all because we've never really been around that kind of accent, or we can't replicate it for various reasons. And it stops certain alters in our system fronting altogether because they either don't like how they sound out here or aren't comfortable with it, or because they struggle with the whole validity issue with regards to not sounding how they say they do or sounding how they do in the inner world. So an alter in a world who has an accent would, for us, feel as if they front and their voice doesn't sound like theirs, that people are going to turn around to them and be like, well, why don't you sound like that? I thought you were from here. And it causes them huge issues, so they tend to just not come out. And that's something we are trying to tackle, but I just wanted to pop in and say that if you are struggling with the same thing or dealing with the same thing, that it doesn't make any difference to an alter's validity. You can have a Spanish alter if you don't speak Spanish, and in a world, they can speak fluently in it, but technically it's not technically, if you're going completely into the logistics of it, that language, but because obviously if you try to bring it out here, it would not make sense. Whereas in a world, it makes perfect sense, and that's fine. It doesn't, like I said, it doesn't change anything. It doesn't alter, no pun intended, the validity of that person in your system. And the same goes for accents. It doesn't matter how you sound when you front, if your tone of voice doesn't change, if the pitch of your voice doesn't change, if your voice doesn't match up to how you sound inside. The whole point of DID is that your brain creates what you need, and it's covert. And honestly, it doesn't make any difference how you sound when you front, whether people can tell the difference, whether people can't tell the difference. The most important thing is that you feel comfortable within yourself when you're out and about, and that you understand that it does not matter in the slightest whether you sound how people think you should, because there is no way for that to happen. All that matters is what you feel and think and what you're comfortable with. So yeah, that's the whole thing. And if people were wondering about the whole, but if you have an alter from such and such a place, why don't you actually know the language when you front? Because you've claimed that you are fluent in Spanish, French, I don't know, Swedish, but you can't bring it out here. And that is because if your brain has never learned the language, you then, obviously when you're fronting, won't technically know that language, but it doesn't alter, again, the pun, it doesn't change how that translates in your inner world. And that's pretty much all I have to say. I hope everyone's holding up okay with this weird time. And if anyone's really struggling with the whole being stuck inside thing, or the isolation, or is stressed about anything at all, then our messages are always open for anybody who wants to drop by. We can be a little slow at replying, but we do our best, and I hope everyone manages to get through it okay. It was nice to meet you all.